Hi witches, happy Friday! This is the final day of my vacation. I promise I will be back next week with tons of exciting things. I've had a little bit of time to ruminate on some really cool content, and I think so. Without further ado, if you are on TikTok, you might have heard of my guest from today. So I am just so grateful and so thankful that I got to sit down with Frankie, aka Chaotic Witch Aunt. Oh my gosh, we had a fantastic conversation. If you haven't already, pause, go subscribe to all of their links, and without further ado, here's Frankie.
Okay, hi everybody. Oh my gosh, so as you guys know, I have a very exciting guest with me, and without further ado, I'm just gonna let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I am Chaotic Witch Aunt, also known as Frankie Castanea. You couldn't know me by either name, no clue. I am on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, and I'm very excited to be here today.
Oh my gosh, well thank you so much for joining us. As you guys know, I love talking to witches about their different practices so we can learn from other people besides me, because certainly my perspective on witchcraft is definitely not the only one. So Frankie, I would just really love to know how and when you discovered witchcraft and came into your own spirituality.
That's a great question, and I'm gonna be honest, I feel like the story changes a little bit every time, because I'm like, maybe this is when it happened. No, wait, this is definitely when it happened.
Food, first of all.
Yeah, I'm like, I was putting out gifts for the fair folk when I was a kid, so I'm like, one, very surprised I didn't get kidnapped. Two, I've always been a little witchy, a little in tune with that kind of stuff, but definitely started my practice at like age 16, asked for a sign from the universe for a difficult situation. I got it, and then I immediately started looking into animal symbolism, and animal symbolism somehow tumbled into like Wiccan. My first book was like Scott Cunningham's Book of Shadows, which is an awful book to start with. He talks about silver needle people. No one knows what he's talking about. But I definitely started there, and I have pictures from when I was like 16, 17, going to my first witch store and getting like a bunch of candles and incense, which like, of course, that's what I did. But that's when it started, and I kind of found it through a need, almost like a push against Christianity. I was like, this God isn't answering me. I'm going to go to someone else. And that's what ended up happening.
I totally feel you, and literally you don't feel bad about that being your first book. Mine was like Teen Witch by Silver Ravenwolf. Yeah, no, I know. It's like, it's okay. You guys can shame me. It's fine. I was like 14. It was like the only thing that my library had. So I was just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. Like, I was so into it. And
well, that's all that existed too.
Literally
we had
like, it was that and like Angel Fire websites, and like,
we had Tumblr later.
Tumblr
was big for me, because I was like, I had my own Tumblr blog. It wasn't a witch blog. It was just a blog. And like Tumblr was where you went to for information. We had Amino maybe later. And then like, apart from that, it was Silver Ravenwolf and Scott Cunningham. That was it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this, I really feel like nowadays there's just such a wide diversity of media, and like that is kind of its own problem, because there is just so much out there, like, for sure. But like, also I'm just like, oh, I can find stuff at Target now, like, sweet. Like,
I found out that my book was at Target, and I was like,
you're
what?
Right. Yeah, it's just because that kind of stuff, like, I remember going to like Barnes and Noble and going to like the spirituality section, and like right next to the Bibles and stuff was like all the angel cards, and yeah, so I totally feel you with the Scott Cunningham thing. So that's super awesome. So it seems like you've been doing this for like a pretty long time, so you feel pretty comfortable with that. I know people are familiar with your work online as well. But how would you say that you kind of describe your practice now, and maybe like how do you feel that has evolved since the beginning? Because I know you've gone through a transition, and I'm not trying to be a creep, but like, it's been really cool to watch. So yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. It's definitely, if I knew I was ending up here when I started, I would have been like, that's really funny. Tell another joke. Like, I wouldn't believe it, because I went from trying to go a very like anti-Christian, like path, just from like a pushback. Not even like, I wasn't even raised Christian. It was like, I went to a church when I was like 6 once. It wasn't even like a religious family. I just was pushing back against what society was telling me was I was supposed to believe and do. And within that, I never expected myself to end up in folk Catholicism. It would like Italian folk magic, because within Italian folk magic, Catholicism and the practices from Rome and the practices from rural areas are so syncretized that it's really difficult to separate it from the saints and the Catholic prayers. So it requires a completely different framework from what I had when I started with it, which is, I am not Catholic, I am not Christian, but I am working with Catholic entities within a Catholic framework. And that's very much how I describe it to people, because they're like, well, you don't believe in God. How do you talk to these guys? And I'm like, well, I talk to them through a Catholic framework, and I see them as spirits that can help me with things without me having to go to the big guy in the sky, God, as they call him. But that's kind of where I am now with some paganism. I don't even consider myself pagan anymore, but like 2 pagan gods and then a whole slew of saints.
Gotcha. That is so fascinating, because this is gonna sound like a weird humble brag. It's really not. It's relevant. I studied fashion in Italy for a while, so I understand like some of that syncretization. I can never say that word properly. But it's real. Like it's there. Like there are all of these practices that people have that like I was just like, but like, yo, that's witchcraft. Like, you know that, right? Like, and I was able to kind of engage with some of the festivals that are still kind of celebrated over there, but aren't necessarily part of like Catholicism proper, you know, because my friends there were like, oh yeah, we're doing this night, and this is like, you know, a spring festival or whatever it was. So sorry, not to be like but I don't remember exactly what the name of it. It was just very interesting to see, and it gave me kind of a better appreciation, I think, for like what I think Christianity really is at its core, which is not necessarily what I was able to experience in my life, for sure. So I think it really is beautiful. Could you speak a little bit more to like some of that, like what you find so intriguing about folk Catholicism and Italian witchcraft? Is that part of like your background, or?
Definitely part of my background. I'm Italian American. The joke with my friends is that I'm Italian X, and like they're like, you're an Italian X, and I'm like, please stop. But I'm Italian American. My great grandfather and great grandma brought my grandma and her 2 sisters over from Calabria, Italy, so southern Italy, and I grew up with aspects of Italian culture that in Italian American culture as well that I just never recognized. Like we Italian American wise, we always had the Feast of the 7 Fishes. We got together Christmas Eve dinner as a kid. It was a big thing. And because of the assimilation was so strong that no one in my family really spoke the language after my great grandparents died. There were aspects of kind of folk magic or really strong folk Catholic beliefs that stayed, but it wasn't as strong as it probably was with my great grandma. And I hear stories about what my great grandma did, how she knew how to cook, exactly what to cook for every season. She always had like intention, season, different meals, and it always made everyone feel better. Kitchen witch. And then my grandma, we talk about how my Nana's novena could fix everything. So it was like a last resort when she did her novena, because you knew everything was going to go in your favor. So she would say, do you want me to do a novena? It's like, no, Nana, it's okay. Do you need me to do a novena? And then you'll finally be like, all right, do the novena, and everything would work out. So these aspects of like folk Catholicism and folk magic filter down, and I of course kind of lean more towards what we would call like stregoneria, which is like Italian witchcraft, Italian folk magic, kind of outside of a strong Catholic lens. The other side of it is benedicaria, which is very much folk Catholic practice. You are Catholic, you are Christian, it abides by very Catholic rules. And of course, depending on who you're talking to, if you're talking to a Benedicte or you're talking to a Strega, there's going to be like Stregoneria and those saying, oh no, this is like different than that, or this is different than that. And some people who practice Benedicaria, called the way of blessing, will say this is not okay to do, this is against God's rules. It's very much like they are so intertwined that I use so many aspects of like Benedicaria in my practice, but they probably will look at some things that I do and be like, that is not okay, that is Stregoneria, that is witchcraft.
Right.
Even though historically the term witch never used, you would not find it. Even if the Fattucchieri, the fixers of Italy, would maybe go to the crossroads or maybe grind up some bones and put it in someone's food. Like, even if they did that, it was not spoken about or it was frowned upon. That kind of darker aspect of it, although I definitely know Italian Italian-American folk practitioners, that they looked at their family's notes and were like, holy shit, this bitch was casting love spells. Like, you were the bad guy. Whoa. But my family has, like, from everything I can find, were fixers. We were blessers. We fixed things, we blessed things. And so because of that, I lean more heavily towards Benedicaria and the folk Catholic ways rather than hexing and cursing, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I am pro baneful magic, but my ancestors will only help if I do it in a backwards way, like blessing someone banefully. And they're like,
I get that one super hard. It's all good. Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, that is like so, I'm sorry, I was like hanging on every word. That was so fascinating because it's just like, it's so different from my practice because I'm definitely still like very much like this is gonna sound weird. Like Satanism, or like working with demons and sort of like that sort of those sort of entities for me is like too close to Christianity for me to even consider practicing in a way, if that makes sense. So the idea of folk Catholicism to me is such like an interesting but foreign world. So it's really, really cool to hear you talk about this. And I feel like in a lot of pagan spaces, like this other side of witchcraft in which you do invoke Catholic saints or work with I spoke to Lena the Jesus Witch, who specifically works with Jesus as an entity, but is like, I'm like not for the church. I'm not, so I think it's not something that is super talked about or was not presented to me as an option. Like when I first started, for me, it was just like, hey, here's Wicca. That's it. Good luck. Like,
Wicca.
So
it's like Wicca, which is repackaged Christianity. And you're like, okay, thanks.
I'm like,
cool.
Wow, so familiar. Like, why do I understand what's happening? Weird. But I guess like my question would be like, how do you feel your practice kind of differs in that way? Like, are there certain symbols or herbs and stuff like that you use more now than maybe you would had you stayed on that kind of neo-pagan or like Wiccan path, if that makes sense?
Definitely makes sense. I almost exclusively now use herbs that are native to my ancestors' town. So ancestral like work, veneration, and connecting with that aspect of myself and my heritage is the biggest part of my practice. Like, ancestors are the foundation in my practice. I honor them, I venerate them, I ask them for help. They, tell me that I gotta wait, or I gotta say my prayers. One time they threw a copy of a bunch of prayers at my head. No, I seriously, it fell out of the closet, hit my head, and rolled. And I was like,
message received, it's fine, I got
I'm like, okay, thanks, thank you. But I very much now am focused on working with the land around me. Working with my houseplants is very big to me. So I guess I dabble in like green witchcraft is what people would call that. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, nah, I just fuck with plants. I love them. I have like an ancestral herb garden. I keep like returning to these plants that my ancestors used in healing and all this stuff. And I definitely probably I'm thinking like back when I was a neo-pagan and I was in search of herbs that other people used frequently. even if these herbs didn't have any meaning to me, I just knew that like mugwort was important. So like I have a bunch of herbs that I grabbed because I could find them used in spells, even if I didn't connect with them. And now I prioritize my connection with the herbs and the plants. So if I don't connect with the plant, like I gave my sister a house plant last night because I wanted one plant and they said it was this one plant. They said it was a nerve plant. It was not a nerve plant, it was a polka dot plant. And I was like, huh. But I knew that I wasn't vibing with this plant. I wasn't going to be able to give it the love it deserved because I just didn't connect with it. Because I had gotten it under the assumption of it was another plant. So I gave it to my sister. And I prioritize that. If I'm not fucking with an herb, if I'm not fucking with a plant, I feel like I'm not connecting with it, I don't use it. So I've transitioned a lot from using things like jasmine flowers, lavender, mugwort, all these traditionally witchy herbs to moving to things that my ancestors used, like rosemary and rue are my biggest babies. I love them. Even then, like angelica, lemongrass. I
love angelica. No one talks about that. I literally just made a video that was like my top 5 favorite herbs, and I was like, no one really talks about angelica, but like I fuck with it super hard.
Angelica is wonderful. I use lemongrass, even though historically my ancestors didn't, but that's because I fuck with lemongrass. I love him. All right, I call him a him, but he could also be a her. I don't know. Agrimony is another one that is native to my ancestors' town. Mullein and mallow. So the fun part about, I moved to Colorado recently, and the fun part about Colorado is that a lot of the herbs my ancestors used grow here. Like I found wild chamomile, and chamomile's super big. It's often referred to as a cure-all, or a panacea herb, alongside vervain or verbena, rue, and I believe there's one other one that I'm forgetting. But things like St. John's wort, things like these heavily Catholic associated herbs, as well as these herbs that my ancestors had access to. Things like belladonna and henbane grow native in my ancestors' town. So I work with those bitches. I love them. Belladonna's my bitch, okay? She helps me with migraines. I love her. Even if I don't work with these plants or these herbs in spell work, I will work with them in my day-to-day life. I will call upon them. I will ingest like essence things with them, which if you're using poisonous plants, it's the only way to ingest them properly. I will have something like, even if they're on the shelf and I'm not using them, I keep them there because I want them to feel included. That's me. But definitely never would have gone anywhere near St. John's wort because all I knew about it at the beginning of my practice was that it helped with like depression.
Right.
And which, don't take it if you're on birth control, it will fuck you up.
Yeah.
So these things that have medicinal properties that I learned about, I never really looked at or gave a second glance, but medicinal and magical are one and the same in Italy. So I returned back to them, and now I have I make healing balms with like mallow and mullein to help with like colds and sores and that kind of stuff, and they're great. I love them.
That is so awesome. I love that because that is really how I also kind of organize my herbalism, is like that kind of intuitive, like, hey, am I vibing with this plant? Like for me, basil is one that I can grow like nobody's business. And like catnip is another one, but that's kind of in the mint family, so it's easier to grow. Anyways, but like there are some like that I feel like people feel obligated to go and buy, like you said, like lavender and mugwort. And while I love those herbs myself personally, they may not be for everybody. And I just really am like thankful that you kind of spoke to that as well, because I think something, and one of the main questions that I get a lot from people is like, how do I connect better with my intuition? Or what does my intuition feel like? And it's hard to explain that, you know, to someone, because I do believe that people connect differently for sure. But I think that is a great example of like, hey, am I vibing with this plant? Like if I'm not, someone else, I know for a fact, that's my intuition telling me someone else could use this better than me. So thank you for like speaking to that. It's like really validating to have conversations with other practitioners. I'm just like, I feel less crazy when I talk to you guys. Like, thank God. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to explain like what a plant spirit is. You guys just kind of get it. Like, so I'm just very grateful for this opportunity. moving on, I guess, before I just ramble and go on tangents like I am wont to do. Do you kind of like a big thing and something that I celebrate because I enjoy celebrating it still, is the Wheel of the Year. Do you do anything like that, or do you have like holidays that are maybe more specific to your practice that maybe line up, or tell me about what you do if you do anything?
So great question. I have kind of my own Wheel of the Year based off of a few things. I always celebrate the equinoxes and the solstices. That is my kind of, because those are big to me. I don't usually refer to them by the names that they are given on the Wheel of the Year. I celebrate the autumn equinox, the summer solstice, the spring equinox, the winter solstice, but I do not call them like Letha and Mabon and etc. because those names don't make sense for me. I also celebrate things like Nemoralia, which is Diana's festival. I love that. I love Nemoralia. It's one of my favorites. I will celebrate things like the Festival of St. John the Baptist, which has I just made a YouTube video on it. We always make St. John's water, and when there are folk traditions associated with a certain holiday, I tend to pay attention to it more. If it's very big in Italy, I usually will celebrate it. So things like the Epiphany, which has a whole witch named Befana. I love Befana. I will celebrate the Epiphany. I tend to do house purification around them, because when you look at the folk spells and the folk magic, you'll find traditions and spells lined up with these major holidays in Italy or in Catholicism. The other things that I do is like I celebrate my birthday. I celebrate New Year's Eve. I don't do feast days as much as I would like. That's something I'm working on. Because
there's a lot, though, I feel like.
Mary has like 50, all right?
Yeah, right.
I can't keep up. I can't keep up. So I will typically look at like which folk traditions line up with a feast day, and that's what I will celebrate. I would love to start celebrating like my name day and like a festival day for St. Mary or St. Michael. Michaelmas is another thing that I try to celebrate but forget, which usually gets me in trouble. He's like, "You're not doing anything?" And I'm like, sorry, I don't want to W.
Say single like French fry or something.
Yeah, it's like,
you're like,
here's a lollipop,
mini cupcake, yay!
Mini cupcake, yay! Happy birthday, or something. I don't know. But so I kind of, and I'm very lenient with myself with celebrating holidays, because like there are a few that I really, really love, like the Festival of St. John the Baptist, when we make St. John's water. That's one of my favorites ever. I love doing it. I love talking about it. But apart from that, I kind of allow myself, like if I'm not feeling up to doing something on Samhain, I'm not going to do it. I also celebrate, I think Samhain is the autumn. I don't know if Samhain's separate.
No, that's like the Witch's New Year. It's like Halloween, basically.
Yeah. So I do celebrate Samhain/Halloween, and that's usually when I do a lot of ancestral communication because of the Veil Center. I also do it at like the spring equinox because I'm like, ancestors can hang out any time of the year. Let's just bring it all the time. But that's kind of how I format it, and I'm still very much creating it and getting used to celebrating a certain holidays. Like I celebrated the Epiphany as a folk witch for like the first time in 2021. I had a great time, but it takes a while to build up these traditions and then like in my practice, and then pass them down or give them to someone else, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That was a really great segue into the next question. And like everything that you said, like I just vibe with super hard because like, I do follow the Wheel of the Year. I work with Celtic deities, so it does kind of make sense in a way to celebrate the fire festivals. But I definitely put more emphasis on like the rhythm of the earth at the time, more so than some of like, you know, I still study and learn about the mythology of like Brigid, for example, but I put more emphasis on, you know, like the awakening of the planet and the beginning of spring. So I totally vibe with you on that, and like connecting with the land. It's been a big part, I think, for me as well. But moving forward, I know you were saying like passing down your traditions and stuff. Has studying this branch of magic revived any family traditions, or maybe like had you like grow closer to like your ancestral roots or anything like that?
Yep. Oh yeah. My mom straight up had a full memory of like Befana in her grandma's kitchen. So these things, the more I kind of push on them or prod them, the more my mom is like, oh yeah, we did that. That makes sense. Like, da, da, da. And I'm like, you didn't tell me that like this was important. But like the thing, a big thing is like Amaro bitters. It's a type of drink. It's made with so many medicinal plants and medical, like it's so good. And I was having a stomachache the other day, and my dad's like, got some, poured out for me, and we have like Fennec Blanco, but there are lots. There's like Strigalicor, all these different types. He poured me some, took a shot of it, stomachache was gone. And I was like, how'd you learn this? This is like he was like, mom's like Papa taught me, like mom's dad. And then my mom's dad learned it from my great grandpa. So it's the way it trickled down and then somehow reached me. Mm-hmm. And things like fennel being important, fennel being used for everything. The things that I grew up with, like little medicinal things like chamomile tea works for everything. It works for heartbreak. It works for a sore throat. Plantain on bee stings. All these kind of things that my mom learned that she picked up from the land around her, as well as her grandma. And like the things, like we always had a garden. Like there were always plants around. There was always a garden. Green witchcraft and folk witchcraft are very intertwined. Mm-hmm. But that kind of stuff, it definitely revived a lot.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. I love, and I've seen this, and maybe I'm just more like able to see it because of the internet now, but I've been seeing like this trend of witches kind of like connecting back to their ancestry, and I think it's just so beautiful to see like how people are doing that, because I think that I mean, at least for me, like I'm not super close with my family in general, so I was just kind of like, oh my god, I can't, like oh my overwhelmed. But by like talking to other witches, I've like recently been like, oh well, like this is just a recipe that has been passed down. Like, you know, I found like recipe cards from my grandmother's grandmother that I can now make as an offering to my ancestors. So I feel like a lot more comfortable with that. So it's nice to hear like other ways that people are connecting as well. Now, I know that you recently wrote a book called Spells for Change, which is so freaking cool. Could you like tell me a little bit more about like what prompted you to write that book? It seems like you're very much like about preserving knowledge and stuff, which is like super cool. And just like, you know, making something for like the modern witch, I think is kind of like what the idea was behind your book. But I'll let you go because I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I call Spells for Change a charcuterie book for starting witchcraft. Because I like called it that the other day, and I'm like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. So if you want to, and I wrote it because I felt like a lot of beginner books weren't actually, I felt like a lot of them were focusing on one thing. I felt like a lot of them were focusing on something religious or within a specific tradition. So I did my best to create something that was not from a specific tradition, pulled from a lot of different knowledge sources. A beginner witch or a non-witch could read it and leave the book with not only resources to continue their journey, but a solid foundation to continue their craft. So I talk about things like grounding, manipulating energy, protection, cleansing, and banishing. These are things that if you have no idea where to start, you can start there and then take what is in the book and formulate it to your own practice. It's like you got like cheese and meat, and you find out you really love cheese, you can go look up more cheese and follow the path of the cheese, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something that it's not as advanced as I think some people want it, but I didn't create it to be advanced. I didn't create it to be super in-depth. I created it to be quick and very accessible and easy to read, with a lot more resources for people to continue as they went forward.
That is awesome, because that literally is like the book that I needed. Like I said, I started with Teen Witch by Silver Ravenwolf. So I could have picked any book, honestly, and it would have been better, I'm sure. Watched her would just be like in the comments, like, excuse me, sorry. But I really like what I felt was like lacking, and something that I really struggled with at the beginning of my practice is like, well, what's next? Like great, like I can like ground and center, and like that's awesome, like I love that, I'm down, like practicing, got my meditation going, but like what else? Like, and that's when I like turned to Tumblr and learned like a lot of crazy shit that isn't even true. Like, because I was like 15 and was like, oh, these are adults. Like, they know what they're talking about.
Dark witches are crazy. And I'm like, you did not remember Tumblr. Tumblr witches were like TikTok times 3, because there's no accountability. There's nothing. Everything went wild.
No laws.
Like, it's crazy. I think I have like a couple blogs that were originally on Tumblr that moved off Tumblr now that I love, like Brina Guerin, who wrote Grove Daughter Witchery. I love her stuff.
Good.
But yeah, crazy shit.
Just lawless, truly. I was like, oh, like in comparison, Witch Talk definitely. I'm just like, oh, this isn't that. Like, there's some cool people. This isn't too terrible, like, by comparison. But that is so awesome. Like, I'm just like, I have like watched you, like, this, not to be like fucking creepy, but like through your like launch of this book, it's just so awesome. And like, I'm just like very proud of you, like from afar.
I also found you through your like altar creating stuff, and I'm like hardcore, like, I should do this now. I'm lazy, so I may not, but I want to.
If you want to, I'm just saying you should do it. Like, but don't put pressure on yourself to do it, because it's something that I find very like meditative, and I like to do it. So, you know, if you're ever like, if the mood strikes you, like me at 3 a.m. like on Facebook Marketplace, where I'm just like, yeah, I just super encourage it. And like, just if I can give you any advice, is just like, don't judge your first, you know, attempt, because I rearrange things a lot. Like, all of the altars that like I've built and put on TikTok no longer exist. Like, I
do that too.
Yeah.
You can't see it, but I have like all my plants over here. I rearrange it all the time. Plants get moved, things like, it just goes crazy. Everything moves all the time.
Anytime I cleanse, I think I have to like move one thing. I don't know what that is, if it's just like I need a new energy flow or something, which is what I have decided is what it is, but it really helps. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you liked that content, because that's really fun, and it's one of my favorite things to do / talk about. So my last question for you, as we are ending up, oh my gosh, but if you don't mind sharing, like, what is a witchy topic that you've been exploring more recently, or just something that you're like really passionate about right now within the realms of witchiness?
So a couple things, because I always have like very special interests. I hyperfixate on things.
I love
it.
So
house plants and magic is a big one, because I feel like not a lot of people, like, I have a couple of friends who are into that. Not a lot of people know that most basic houseplants have really strong magical associations. So as I'm buying more plants and loving spending time with my plants and learning from my plants, that's something I'm focused on. I'm also, I feel like that's mostly it right now. That's okay. Oh, I'm like trying to experiment making my own waters and like salves and stuff. And I want to end up like with an herbalism certificate. So that's something that I'm exploring to get eventually, but it will take time. It's going to take a while. But for right now, I love experimenting with like safe herbs in balms and in waters. And using like common sense and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So that's been my like go-to thing recently.
That's so funny, because literally same. I have like 3 different like herbalism, like intro to herbalism courses that I have like saved, and like I'm like putting money towards, because I like want all the textbooks and stuff. Like, I have to have like the tactile stuff. So but I'm also like experimenting with like infusing like oils, and like I'm doing more like tinctures and stuff like that. So it's so cool. I love herbalism so much. It's just such a nice way to really connect back and like work in partnership, I think, with the land that you are kind of a steward over. At least that's how I don't have a whole lot of land. I have like 3 window boxes, but you know, it's part of like, you know, it's part of me doing my part. And I do more of like the, you know, land cleanup when I go hiking sort of thing. I'm like, I respect you. I just don't, there's a lot of pavement around me right now. I'm sorry. But oh my gosh, thank you so much for like chatting with me and just like being so open about your practice. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you wanted to shout out that you're working on right now? Places that we can support you, like what you got going on?
That's a good question. I very recently released my first workshop through my website, which is Spellcrafting 101, which you can find at chaoticwitchaunt.com. I'm also going to be offering paid spells on my website, which I feel like is going to be a big thing that people are interested in. They're going to be limited per month. So keep an eye out on my Instagram, which is also Chaotic Witch Aunt, and my TikTok and my YouTube, also Chaotic Witch Aunt. And I also have a Patreon where you can support me, join me in book club, watch me do unfiltered book reviews, and get free access to my workshops. So those are where you can find me and all that good stuff.
Awesome. And that is all going to be linked down below, as you guys know, because we got to support each other in this beautiful community. So thank you so much, Frankie, for coming on and just like chatting with us. It was so fun. And I just like wish you all the best with all of those things, because I know you're great. But
thank you for having me. I had a great time. I love talking to you. I love interviews. If you ever want to, I'll try to like hop you over on my channel to do something as well.
Well, yeah.
I'm very, thank you.
Oh my gosh, no problem.